We'll take a closer look at the naval doctrine of the Empire on today's Star Wars video. Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. Today's episode is brought to you by the Eckhart's Ladder Patreon. Earlier this week, I put a call out for hashtag AskEck Some will be made into videos, others will get a written response by the end of the week. Either way, if you want a chance to guarantee your question is answered, consider joining the Patreon. Otherwise, there's always a chance if you leave a question with the hashtag AskEck below. So today's comes from Aaron, who says, this is a bit broad, but could you explain the naval doctrine and rationale of the Empire a bit better? He continues stating he understands the fear aspect of Star Destroyers, but why would the Empire expect capital ship opposition after the defeat of the CIS? You probably still could produce large ships which are more focused on point defense. It just seems strange that they really would only produce capital ships designed for capital ship combat. So before we get into the deeper analysis of the Imperial Navy, a lot of these questions have to do with the Star Destroyer. So let's talk about the Star Destroyer itself. And while the ISD certainly was great at capital ship warfare, it really was just a powerful all-around ship. The ISD was massive compared to other contemporary warships. It could facilitate an entire ground invasion. It could dominate a planet from orbit, had weapons capable of precision striking ground targets, and when it came to starfighters, if you read the New Essential Guide to Vehicles and Vessels, it actually addresses this, saying specifically, when the Emperor came to power, Kuan Drive Yards developed the next wave of galactic assault vehicles, the Imperial 1 class Star Destroyer. The Imperial Star Destroyer's primary weapon systems include 60 Tamanbak XX-9 turbo lasers equipped with advanced targeting technology for use against fast-moving starfighters. Initially, Star Destroyers were meant to be used as a part of dedicated task forces, and they often were. However, the beauty of the Imperial Star Destroyer from the perspective of the Empire was that it had, and I quote, a power generator yet to be surpassed. And I'm assuming that's in reference to the time it was constructed, but the Imperial Star Destroyer was very capable of operating on its own, given its all-around destructive and defensive potential, plus the fact that it carried several squadrons of TIE fighters, shuttles, advanced craft, and it also had very fast engines. These ideas are all expanded on by the New Essential Guide to Warfare, which states, officially, each superiority group was assigned a battle squadron of 18 smaller ships, but in practice, Star Destroyers were normally accompanied by just 2 or 3 escorts, if any. An Imperial Star Destroyer was designed to operate without support and was too fast for any escorts except the speediest light cruisers. However, these superiority fleets I just mentioned were only one half of the early Imperial Navy. There were also escort forces, which were, and I quote, designed for combat against pirate gangs and rebel raiders, which in practice meant they were the Empire's first line of defense. They leaned heavily on old trade defense frigates and Corellian corvettes, but also cheap new designs like the EF-76, which by the way is the Nebulon B. You see ships like the IPV, which lacked a hyperdrive, used, for example, in roles ranging from customs to anti-piracy to escort. But still, we have to look at the choice of the Imperial Star Destroyer, and based on the New Essential Guide to Warfare, a lot of that does come down to both arrogance and also the Tarkin Doctrine. Something like the Venator may have been more practical and flexible when dealing with certain threats, but the Imperial Star Destroyer was seen as a new symbol of terror and carried enough starfighters that on its own, really, it should have been able to make up for any shortcomings, and that seemed to be the case until the emergence of the Rebel Alliance, which were the only ones really to threaten the Empire in any meaningful way. There were great ship designs meant to work alongside the Imperial Star Destroyer to protect against its weaknesses. One was the Lancer, but it seems like the Imperial military was so bogged down in like traditionalism that those ships just never saw prominence, except under really forward-thinking and creative commanders like Thrawn. And really, the Star Destroyer did its job well enough. It was the most powerful warship of its era, with some exceptions like the later Super Star Destroyer. And really, the loss of the Empire at Endor and its subsequent crumbling was not because of any shortfall in the ISD. It was really Palpatine springing a trap which went fatally wrong. You know, on a philosophical point, I think the lesson of Star Wars is the one we got in Andor, that domination and tyranny is not natural. The only way the Empire is able to maintain order while forcing the galaxy to bend the knee is through fear, and eventually it seems inevitable that will fail. I'm going to read an introduction to one of the earliest sources of Star Wars Legends lore, the Imperial Sourcebook. The Galactic Empire consists of 1,000 worlds caught in the iron grip of tyranny. Using overwhelming armies and vast navies, the Empire instituted a reign of terror among the disheartened and enslaved planets. No world, no system, no race was immune to the terrible machinations of the New Order. But the galaxy was not always such a dark and foreboding place. Once there was a good and pure government called the Old Republic, protected by the shining light of the Jedi Knights. By the way, I've recommended it a million times, but I highly recommend, if you really want to learn more about the deep lore of Star Wars, check out the Imperial Sourcebook. So much of what was created by that document went on to inform the Thrawn trilogy and thus become really weaved within the fabric of how the universe works. Everything from interdictors to how the Empire and Rebel Alliance actually work on like a functional basis. It all comes from there. Kind of crazy because they had to do all that without knowing what the Republic actually was or what the Clone Wars were. Anyway, going back to the ISD for a second, I really like the Sourcebook's take on the ISD. The Imperial Star Destroyer has enough firepower to reduce a civilized world to slag or take on a fleet of lesser vessels. There are whole star systems whose gross domestic product is less than the cost of a single Imperial destroyer. There are whole nations which, throughout their entire history, do not use as much energy as an Imperial expends to make a single hyperspace jump. To carry out the Empire's mandate of rule through fear and the swift destruction of opposition, the Imperial-class Star Destroyer is the weapon of choice. By deploying a Star Destroyer and support ships to a system, the Empire can destroy virtually every foe. Then it goes on to explain really the heart of the Tarkin Doctrine, which is, it's impossible to police an entire galaxy. But the idea has to be, when we do get to you, if you start acting up, any resistance will be completely worthless. Here's the quote. It is impossible to garrison every world and every system, but the Imperial Star Destroyer gives the Emperor the ability to project his power anywhere he wishes in a short period of time. These vessels are more than weapons platforms. They also act as space stations, repair docks, and heavy transports for smaller craft. The Empire was not endless, and it was not all powerful, but it wanted to appear as such. That's why all stormtroopers looked the exact same, and that's why, instead of a more practical fleet, the Imperial Navy invested in the ISD. All you need is one to show up. Most likely any sort of resistance will just not be possible. And that was fine until the Rebel Alliance organized and started gaining more and more support. So maybe if the Empire hadn't used the ISD, they would have been less vulnerable to the Alliance, but maybe you would have seen more planets openly rebel. Anyway, hopefully that answers your question. Maybe we can go into any more. I've done a video in the past on how the Empire liked to organize their fleets and some of the other special tactics they used, but for now, I hope this helps. Until next time, guys, be safe, have a good one, and may the Force be with you. Bye-bye.